What controversial opinion do you hold? That really isn't a big deal, but people get mad or think you're crazy. Cashiers should able to sit down and listen to music and hunt some customers for sport if they so choose. No, not a cashier. Not in most parts of the US or Canada, no. I was once a cashier and I was also told I could not visit the bathroom since there was no one to cover my till. I did not last long. I haven't been to one in a really long time, but I'm curious if they're allowed to sit down at Trader Joe's too. Aldi in Germany was owned by two brothers Karl and Theo Albrecht. Albrecht discount. They split decades ago over whether they should sell cigarettes in store to Aldi South Karl and Aldi North. Aldi South is Aldi in the US, while Aldi North is Trader Joe's. Theo bought the company from the original owner. Since it's a little different, Trader Joe's wasn't originally German. Curious if the same rules apply. Same here in the UK. There have been a couple of times at my mom's work where someone has had a knee or back injury and get shouted at for bringing a chair to the register and sitting down. Retail and shop workers really do not get paid enough for the amount of shit they have to deal with. Don't think that's any sort of law. Your employer doesn't have to provide you with a seat to do your job. Generally, sitting down slows down most work as well. Good for the employee, bad for rates and productivity. Elling with other people's money. I used to work retail and run the register. During downtime I would sit on the countertop, no belts, just a countertop. A customer told me that, and I was like, they don't pay me enough to cover gas and insurance to get here. I'll do as I please. While this statement was true, I was also having trouble standing, connective tissue disorder, and they weren't providing a stool or chair for me to sit at. The customer was all, wait till your boss sees you. And I was like, she's right there, pointing at her. We never saw him again. Really, my boss would have let me sit, but because the space behind the register was so small and it needed to be accessible to whoever was working, plus, we didn't have tall enough seats for the register, couldn't undo my job. I missed that job. I worked in a cinema and sprained my ankle pretty bad. Aldo had a fracture, but it was small, so doctor told me I had to sit and not put too much weight on it. A co-worker at the same time had something with her back, and also was told to sit down, so we got off cleaning the theater after each movie, but got told we'd look lazy and non-welcoming if we were seated. Instead, when there were no customers, we'd have to take turns walking into the office, a decent flight of stairs from us to have a seat. There was an elevator, but staff couldn't ride it. It looked lazy. My poor customers, when they saw me limping, and tried to encourage me to have a seat. Whenever I'd tell them that it looked worse than it was, it didn't. My ligament is fafked still 6 years later. They'd tell my boss, who'd then give me a hard time for making the customers pity me. We also weren't allowed to yawn or sneeze, like not even turn around to do it even if there weren't customers around. I had to sit through country music from the radio every single day. It wasn't even classic country. It was that stupid pop country from the 2000s. I'll rip out someone's jugular if I have to sit through Boys Down Here Again. A song clearly about picking up dudes and having threesomes with the pickup truck. In all seriousness, I'd be fine with music if they played it from the radio or phone. What I was thinking when I read the comment was them using earbuds. I also meant earbuds. The few I have experienced with earbuds were still perfectly able to interact with others. So my conclusion has been they weren't listening at high volumes. Although cashiers with earbuds are very, very rare here. Most have a headset to be able to talk to other cashiers and working stuff quickly. I used to be a cashier, and I have a disability where I can't stand for long periods of time, plus my feet have been crushed repeatedly, which makes standing quite painful. On top of it, I was made to stand 4-6 hours with a single 15-30 minute break where I could sit. I asked for a chair and was denied it. I left shortly after. Plus, my manager was a dick. Lamau. Lol, yeah, I was denied a chair for my disability because it was considered a hazard. Cashiers shared a square-shaped register area. Thankfully, my managers were all super nice and whatnot and very helpful. But yay, it's kinda absurd that in this day age, it can be ridiculously impossible in getting disability accessibility, something even as simple as a chair. Lol. As someone who can't stand for long periods of time not due to a disability, I'm obese trying to lose weight, for God's sakes. I'd kill for a job that would let me sit. If I stand for a long period of time and move, I go slower than usual, which is what people do not want. Lol. The fact that sitting at work is unprofessional is horsesh tea. I don't give a shit if a cashier sits as long as they're courteous and scan my shit properly. Will the hunting be non-lethal? Like the cashier would chase a customer through the store and try tag them with a paintball gun. If the customer can escape without being hit, they get a discount on all purchased products for the next 2 weeks. If they get hit, they still get a discount on a single product for a week for participation, 'cause I would totally be up for that. Working as a cashier in a right-to-work state is fantastic. I used to listen to Opie and Anthony Howard Stern or just random metal stations uncensored on a boombox. You'd sometimes have customers complain. I'd give them the number to corporate and tell them feel free to call. My store manager said, if anyone gives you grief over that, tell them they can leave the store and not hear the offensive content. Meanwhile, I was stuck for 8 hours. Corporate never disciplined anyone for it. But even if you got fired from your minimum wage job, you could go next door to get some work. Most of the service jobs where you don't have to communicate ye whole time with customers. In an interview for cleaning person in a small hotel, they had a policy that you can't listen to music when tidying up the room, as someone might ask you something. So because someone wants something once a week, I should just like that job even less. I'm 75% in the camp that we should do away with daylight savings. So not passionately committed, but I find it annoying. I told my husband this, and you'd think I told him I thought the earth was flat with how incredulous condescending he was about it. It's pointless now, especially when it isn't even fully observed countrywide. Once I started using a phone as an alarm, I stopped changing my clocks and just remembered when to subtract an hour. Really, it was a good wake-up tool since I had to onboard to the day with a second of mental work. Car clocks are annoying to change. I don't care which one we choose, DS or standard. Just pick one and stick with it. Daylight savings is useless, but it is extremely useful at the correct latitudes, both in light time gains and allows save money on the heat and electricity bills. People who want to get rid of it are just people who so not care if some people get a lot less, in order to make their own lives a bit easier. People get mad about that. If you ask me, it doesn't actually save daylight. It just changes what the clock says at certain times of the day, and it messes things up. The only reason why I ever liked it is 'cause in the fall, I would gain an hour of sleep before school. I was badly sleep deprived during my school years, but then in spring, I would lose an hour of sleep. Now that I'm not in school anymore, it doesn't do anything but make me have to change all the clocks. An inconvenience. I don't understand the debate. People say you gain or lose time or daylight, which makes no sense to me. Time and daylight operate independently of our timekeeping devices. I also don't understand the issue. The day of the switch, the clock is a bit off, but after that, it isn't noticeable. Some people claim they get sleep problems over an hour here or there. When I was a teenager, an hour was a long time. Now that I'm older, they fly by. Girls who like horses. As a husband to a woman who likes horses and father to a daughter who likes horses, I completely agree with you. I can't stand horses. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to see them hurt, but I don't get the appeal. For starters, I'm allergic to both them and grass, so that's a fucking nightmare, but also, they are insane. Something that weighs half a ton, but will freak out if a plastic bag floats past it, or will bite you on the arse just for a laugh. And the cost, dear God, the cost of everything horse-related. Then all the assorted hoodies, notebooks, mugs, t-shirts with horses on them, the smell of horses. Driving really slowly everywhere just in case there's one in the road around the corner. Being then stuck behind it for a mile because there's two of them side by side. It goes on. I do really like donkeys though. Think many people agree with this. It just gets dicey when it comes to the system denying people options for living with dignity. Someone starving robs a grocery store, there's no number they can call for immediate food assistance, but they sure can get arrested for stealing shit to not die. Someone's having a mental health crisis because they can't afford medical bills and reaches out, tells someone as much, can be robbed of autonomy, held against their will, and charged for it all while being pulled away from the problems that made them suicidal to begin with. thus making those problems worse. When people are not given access to the resources and opportunities necessary to live with dignity, they will choose to die with it. That, and who gets to decide? The amount of otherwise healthy disabled people tricked into signing DNRs during the pandemic is fact. It's all about consent, until, so much as I 100% agree, implementing assisted suicide without tackling other societal shit has the potential to lead to profound tragedy. Eugenics. This hits hard. I'm really sick ATM, and trying not to kick the bucket. Sick enough doctors recommended palliative care but insurance denied it, so I'm currently surviving on medical marijuana and Tylenol and a feeding tube lol. The pain has gotten so bad I've begged for someone to just put me out of my misery, rolling around a bathroom floor, puking blood coming out of me in all the ways, including my stoma, dropping 40 pounds like it's nothing. It's fucking cruel what humans are expecting me to go through every single day. They could possibly take advantage of me in a situation like this if they were to talk to me during a bad pain day. I can't begin to describe how horrific the pain can be. I thought unmedicated labor and delivery was horrific. I'd rather go through that again every day of the week instead. I live in the bathroom for 8 hours a day in the morning alone, including the rest of the day, every single day. I'm actually in the bathroom now just existing at 4 a.m. This isn't living. I'm in serious agony, and this has been going on for years now. I'm not a superwoman, I can only cope for so long with so much. By the way, I'm mentally okay, no need to panic. I have a therapist, and shit too. But this is a side I really want to share for those who don't see these types of sides often. Awareness is a good thing. I'm not sure exactly if there's anything I could say that could provide you any comfort, but wanted you to know that I read this and really felt for you, and I'm sorry that you're going through something as shitty as this. I hope there's a breakthrough for you. I really hope the pain eases up. Faft, no words are cheap, but I feel for ya. That's gotta be exhausting. A lot of people suggesting quick fixes really don't know what people are out here facing. Also, fwit, I'm still around, and you decide you want the resource. I can share the title of a book available through public libraries that will walk you through how to opt out early if that knowledge would bring comfort. In the past, having the knowledge on how to relatively safely having that choice actually made it easier to keep going. Not advocating for anything here, just offering a resource that personally helped me. Yimv, and I trust ya to know what's best for you. Yay, I'm really tired. In all of the ways. Feel free to share the name with me. I have kids, so I try really hard to fight for them. Just sometimes, when you're laying on the bathroom floor on R5 in such pain, you're violently shaking blood, puke everywhere because you're in too much agony to even move. It's easy to pray for death. Absolutely, that makes total sense. It's called Final Exit, the Practice of Self-Deliverance and Assisted Suicide for the Dying by Derek Humphrey. It frankly discusses his history with the topic, how a loved one, some others have found peace that would have otherwise been denied to them and their families, while also continuously reminding the reader of risks and to not to misuse the information in a way I feel respects both the seriousness of the topic and the reader's dignity. It's always a tricky subject to write about or share, because you don't want the info used impulsively when other solutions to problems might exist, but at the same time people feeling like they don't have choices in life or even their death can actually drive them into more extreme, impulsive acts that are more harmful to themselves and those around them. Acts they might not have attempted at all simply by virtue of having knowledge and feeling like they have a choice, a shred of agency. That's my 2 cents. Regardless, hope you have people around you who are able to help cultivate small moments of dignity as much as possible. Wishing you the best. Reading this was so deep and induced some serious anger. My mother spent her last few years in utter agony after she got in Levad. Her quality of life was non-existent, especially because she got cancer a year later, which obviously decreased her already abysmal quality of life and made her ineligible ever get a heart. She had always said the only good part about the Levad is that she could just unplug it and she'd be dead in seconds. That's so depressing and awful. It may not literally buy the emotion of joy, but it can buy a roof over your head and food on your table, and water out of your tap and medicine, and everything else you need to survive, so you can focus instead on the things that genuinely bring you joy instead of what you only need to survive. There's a push to individualize the causes of unhappiness. People are taught to believe they're unhappy due to their own personal trauma, mental health issues, or similar. Unhappy first step. Go get therapy, work on yourself, read a self-help book, take some medication. I think the truth is far simpler. People are increasingly unhappy because society is broken. It's easier to deal with trauma or mental health issues if you have a steady job, a roof over your head, and time to enjoy life. I think there are vested interests who prefer us to blame ourselves or fight amongst ourselves. Agreed, freedom from financial stress goes a long way towards happiness and mental well-being. As someone who struggled financially and is now financially stable, not rich, but like I never run out of money between pay cycles, can afford to save every fortnight, and I never have to check my account balance before purchases anymore. Not having the weight of that financial anxiety has done wonders for my well-being. Makes sense though, not having to worry about making rent or bills or putting food on the table gives people so much more capacity to enjoy life, because you're no longer just trying to survive. If you're sad and lonely looking for a purpose in life, $50 million falling into your lap isn't gonna change that. In fact, it'll probably just make things worse, since you'll have blown all that money on stupid things you think will make you happy, like giant homes or fast cars. However, the ability to always have enough money to pay the bills with enough left over to fix life's many unexpected problems contributes massively to your mental health. That is how money buys happiness. So the saying should change to, money doesn't buy stupid people happiness. If I were looking for purpose, hobbies, whatnot, I wouldn't have the time and or money, since I have to work all day just to pay bills. If I had money enough that I didn't have to work all day, I'd pursue more fulfilling things to do with my time and be healthier from working less stress, healthier food, which is both more expensive and takes more time. A ton of money buys you time. Time to be happy and healthy. 50 million into my lap? You're saying I could find a job I actually cared about, work as I liked, and never worry about the bills? I could take up the hobbies I wanted, commit to them as much as I liked, and never worry about the equipment costs? I could go do anything with my buddies and pay the bill all by myself, so my buddies wouldn't have to consider the costs? I think time and money for hobbies alone would significantly reduce my loneliness and give me the space to seek purpose in life. And I wouldn't need even close to 50 million. 5 would be more than enough for my whole life. I think most smart people could do the same. It's just that 50 million usually doesn't fall into the lap of the most considering and calculated people, because those traits don't encourage you to play lottery. It's not that money buys you happiness, it removes a lot of the things that prevent you from finding happiness, constantly worrying about rent, car payments, insurance. Once you have money, those factors aren't slowing you down. Now you get to relax. Maybe purchase a new TV or something you have wanted but couldn't afford. It does to a point. Once you get to a point where you don't have to worry about being able to pay your bills and are able to live comfortably, adding more money won't add to your happiness anymore. At that point, you're unfortunately gonna have to do the one ring nobody wants to do: work on yourself. That opinion has been studied, and there is strong evidence to suggest that money does indeed buy happiness, but with diminishing returns. Depending on where you live, it's probably like somewhere around the 100K to 200K income bracket, where increased money starts giving less happiness with increased money, as you've got enough at that point to largely have the things people want in life, albeit with the career consuming much of their time still. I usually say that one can be sad in either a Honda or a Ferrari, but when you're wealthy you can take the necessary time off to address the cause of your sadness. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys time, and you can use that time to find happiness. Mandatory reporting increases suicides. The research exists. Being impulsively suicidal because you lack proper coping mechanisms or have a chemical imbalance is not the same as doing everything in your power to better your life and being trapped in a situation where you have no quality of life. Individually insurmountable systemic barriers exist. but we would rather pathologize normal human reactions that actually help. What people trapped in these situations need is not to be robbed of autonomy, taken into a mandatory hold, and away from time-sensitive ST, but for their material needs to be met. Going through ST, you literally cannot fix alone, and not even being able to talk about it without risking making an already barely survivable situation worse, makes people more suicidal. That we think therapy is the answer to much more complex societal problems is survivorship bias. That is, therapy has its place, but it shouldn't be a crutch. Less people will need therapy if they have their basic needs met, and that is where we should be throwing money. My involuntary hospitalization saved my life, but it was also intensely traumatizing. Also, being around people who are going through a mental health crisis while you are trying to recover is horrible. So many sleepless nights listening to people screaming. I feel so strongly about this. I don't want to be embalmed or cremated. I don't want my family to pay thousands of dollars for some enormous extravagant silk-lined casket that they see once and then bury underground in some monoculture park. I don't want some stranger in a suit saying a bunch of stuff about me in a funeral home. My ideal way to go is to be buried in a natural environment in a shroud with only friends and family present. The funeral industry is gross. I told my family that whenever I die, I didn't want any funeral arrangements, just to have my body be disposed of and let everyone mourn if they need to. No funeral home, no embalming, no burial in a casket. My mom thinks I'm insane. I just don't like the idea of being buried in a box, either burnt into ash or filled with chemicals. If no one is going to see, I'd rather have the earth reclaim my corpse more than anything. In a similar vein, my grandparents are buried in a natural funeral park. The whole place is a large forest, and all the coffins are designed to decay roughly in line with the bodies. It's actually a beautiful place too, very well kept, and tended by the groundskeepers or funeral workers. Not only gross, but in some cases ludicrously corrupt. The cremation business back in the day used to be the Wild West. A lot of unscrupulous greaseballs got into the business for all the wrong reasons. David Sconce was a greedy, vile boss who ran coastal cremation services back in the 80s. His specialty was cut-rate cremations, achieved by cramming bodies into the retorts a dozen or more at a time. Ashes were collected in trash cans and mixed together indiscriminately. People who paid to have grandma cremated got back the ashes of up to 200 other people. He stole gold teeth. He recycled charred hip implants. He tricked family members of the deceased into giving him permission to harvest tissue and eyes from corpses for a medical tissue bank, which he also owned. If that didn't work, he'd just forge their signatures. Normally, this is done in sterile lab settings, but he and his cronies simply hacked bodies apart with hatchets and screwdrivers. There truly was nothing he wouldn't do. Eventually, he moved his crematory to an industrial kiln works in the California desert, where he was cremating dozens of bodies at a time in brick-firing kilns that were never made to handle a body, much less 13 bodies at once. The compound was full of melted human fat and half-cremated remains. There were tubs of unidentifiable ashes everywhere. The brick-firing ovens belched out a constant plume of greasy black smoke that could be seen for miles. He was only caught because an old man from the nearest town could smell the bodies burning. He told the police, "Don't tell me what a burning body smells like. I worked the ovens at Auschwitz, and that man is burning bodies. You should let your family know about this. I left money strictly for funeral shit. I don't personally care about funeral, but I've come to believe funeral is for the living, not the dead. Also, I missed my grandma funeral due to her brother being a dick. But I wonder if she was embalmed. Maybe I could have seen her. I was in another part of the country, and she died early morning, and all flight was full since it was the start of the school holiday. I remember no one willing to exchange flights, since the next day flight was also full. The airline took pity and let me sit on the jump seat. This was post 9/11s. Nevertheless, I missed the funeral by 15 minutes. An older friend of mine who lived in the Seattle area died early last year, and instead of being buried, he was laid in. Basically, he was put into a tube with some other organics, sealed up, and left to decompose naturally. At some point in the future, I think it's less than a year, his composted remains can be returned to the family to do with as they please. He may become part of a garden soon. This should be legal everywhere.